Picture this. A young lord, barely 23 years old, walks into King's Landing with an army of 20,000 northern warriors at his back. He does not draw his sword. He does not loose a single arrow. Yet every lord, every knight, every schemer in the capital bows before him like he is death itself walking among them. Now imagine another warrior. A prince with silver hair and purple eyes, mounted on a blood-red dragon that screams like a demon from the depths of hell. For over 30 years, this man carves his legend across battlefields from the Stepstones to the God's Eye. They call him the most dangerous man in the Seven Kingdoms, and when he finally meets his end, he leaps from his dying dragon onto another mid-flight, drives his sword through his enemy's skull, and plummets into a lake locked in eternal combat. Two warriors, two legends. One question that has haunted fans of Game of Thrones for years. If Cregan Stark and Daemon Targaryen had faced each other in single combat, with no armies, no dragons, just two men and their Valyrian steel blades, who would have walked away alive? One man who made kings tremble without ever riding a dragon. Another who defined what it meant to be a Targaryen warrior prince. The patient wolf of the north versus the reckless rogue prince. Ice against fire. Youth against experience. The warrior who never needed to prove himself against the warrior who proved himself in blood every single day of his life. But here is what nobody tells you about these two legends. There is one moment, one crucial detail about their lives that changes everything we think we know about who was truly deadlier. Before we reveal that, if you love deep dives into Game of Thrones lore and epic warrior comparisons, smash that like button and subscribe because you will not want to miss what comes next. Let me tell you a story about two men who changed Westeros forever. The year is 131 after conquest. The Dance of the Dragons, the bloodiest civil war in Targaryen history, has just ended. Dragons are dead, cities are burned, tens of thousands lie in mass graves across the Seven Kingdoms. The realm is broken, traumatized, and teetering on the edge of total collapse. In King's Landing, an 11-year-old boy named Aegon the Younger sits on the Iron Throne, surrounded by schemers and murderers who poisoned his uncle to seize power. The capital is a nest of vipers, each one plotting to control the child king. And from the frozen north, marching down the King's Road with the largest northern army seen in generations, comes a man they call the Wolf of Winterfell. Cregan Stark, 23 years old, Lord of Winterfell and Warden of the North. Born in the year 108, after conquest to Lord Rickon Stark and Lady Gillian Glover, he became Lord of Winterfell at age 13 when his father died, but his uncle refused to give up power. So at 18, Cregan imprisoned his own uncle and took what was his by right. He married his childhood love, Aranori, only to watch her die giving birth to their son. The North forged Cregan Stark in ice and loss and iron necessity. He stands taller than most men, powerfully built like the ancient kings of winter. In his hands he wields ice, the ancestral Valyrian steel greatsword of House Stark, 6 feet of rippling steel that would break the arms of lesser men. They say he can swing it one-handed when battle rage takes him. They say he has never lost a fight in his entire life. They say when Cregan Stark walks into a room, even dragons would think twice. But 1 year earlier, in 130, after conquest, another legend met his end above a lake called the God's Eye. Daemon Targaryen, the rogue prince, born in the year 81 after conquest, making him 49 years old when he died. Brother to King Viserys I, uncle and husband to Queen Rhaenyra. For more than 3 decades, this man was the living embodiment of Targaryen supremacy. Lean and battle-scarred, with the silver hair and purple eyes of old Valyria, Daemon was everything a warrior prince should be. In his hand he carried Dark Sister, the Valyrian steel longsword, once wielded by Visenya Targaryen herself. Lighter than ice, faster, designed for precision kills, and beneath him always was Caraxes, the bloodworm, a dragon as fierce and unpredictable as the man who rode him. Daemon Targaryen fought in the Stepstones for 9 years and crowned himself king of the Narrow Sea. He commanded the city watch of King's Landing. He waged war across Westeros during the Dance of the Dragons. He killed more men than most soldiers see in a lifetime. And in his final act, he performed the most legendary feat of single combat ever recorded, leaping from dragon to dragon, mid-battle, to drive Dark Sister through his enemy's eye socket. 2 warriors, 2 different paths to glory, 2 legends that never met in combat. Until now, in our story, we ask the question, who was deadlier? When Cregan Stark was born in 108 after conquest, the Maesters say a winter storm battered Winterfell for 3 days straight. Snow piled higher than the castle gates. Wolves howled in the Wolfswood. The North welcomed one of its fiercest sons the only way it knows how, with ice and wind and the promise of hardship. His father, Lord Rickon Stark, began training him the moment he could hold a wooden sword, not because he wanted to, because he had to. The North does not forgive weakness. Every lord's son learns to fight, but Cregan learned something more. He learned that in the North, your word is your bond and your sword is your justice. Rickon Stark, his grandfather, used to say that any man who cannot defend his own lands deserves to lose them. Cregan took that lesson into his bones. He had a younger brother once. The histories do not record his name, only that he died in 119. After conquest, when Cregan was 11 years old. Some say it was illness, others whisper it was a hunting accident in the Wolfswood. Whatever the truth, losing his brother changed Cregan, made him harder, more distant, the kind of hard that steel gets when you plunge it into ice water. 2 years later, in 121, after conquest, Lord Rickon Stark died. Cregan became Lord of Winterfell at 13 years old, still a boy by southern standards, already a man by northern ones. But here is where the story gets interesting. His uncle Bernard Stark was supposed to serve as regent until Cregan came of age at 16, supposed to prepare him for lordship, and then step aside. Bernard did not step aside. When Cregan turned 16 in 124, after conquest, his uncle found reasons to delay. The North needed experienced leadership. Cregan was too young, too untested. The lords would not respect him. Every excuse in the world to hold on to power just a little bit longer. For 2 more years, Cregan chafed under his uncle's rule, watched Bernard make decisions that should have been his, felt the eyes of northern lords on him, wondering if he had the strength to take what was his. In 126, after conquest, at 18 years old, Cregan Stark ended the charade. He did not ask permission, did not negotiate. He walked into the Great Hall of Winterfell, with a dozen loyal men, arrested his uncle Bernard and all 3 of his cousins, and had them thrown into the cells beneath the castle. No trial, no long speeches, just the cold reality of northern justice. You try to steal from a Stark, you pay the price. The lords of the North watched this unfold and understood immediately. This was not Rickard's son anymore. This was something forged in frustration and loss, and waiting. This was a lord who would not be denied what was his by right. Shortly after taking full control of Winterfell, Cregan married his childhood companion, Ara Nori. The histories say they were in love, that she was kind and brave, and everything a lady of Winterfell should be. For 2 years they ruled together. Cregan began making his mark as Lord of the North, settling disputes, strengthening the wall, preparing for the winter that always comes. Then in 128, after conquest, Ari died, giving birth to their son. Cregan held her hand as the life bled out of her. named their boy Rickon after his father, and something inside the young Lord of Winterfell turned to ice. He had lost his brother, lost his father, lost his wife. The North takes and never gives back. So Cregan learned not to expect anything but what he could carve out with his own 2 hands. By the time Prince Jacaerys Velaryon flew into Winterfell in 129, after conquest, Cregan Stark was 21 years old and already a legend in his own right. The prince came seeking northern support for his mother Rhaenyra's claim to the Iron Throne. What he found was a young lord who stood nearly as tall as the doors of the Great Hall, who could swing a 6-foot greatsword like other men swing daggers, who spoke in quiet tones that somehow carried more weight than shouting ever could. They say Jacaerys reminded Cregan of his dead brother, that the 2 young men became friends almost immediately. Cregan took the prince to the wall, showed him the ancient ice that separates the realm from whatever darkness lurks beyond. They drank together, hunted together, and before Jacaerys flew south again they made a pact, the Pact of Ice and Fire, in exchange for northern support in the coming war. Jacaerys would marry his firstborn daughter to Cregan's son Rickon, binding House Stark and House Targaryen in blood. But Prince Jacaerys never had a daughter. He died at the Battle of the Gullet, his dragon Vermax pulled into the sea by chains and scorpion bolts, the prince drowning in his armor, while sailors hacked at him with axes. The Pact of Ice and Fire died with him. Cregan Stark kept his word anyway. That tells you everything you need to know about the man. A Stark does not break an oath because the other party is dead. A promise is a promise. So in 130 after conquest, as winter began to bite and the dance of the dragons raged across the south, Cregan gathered the largest northern army seen in a generation, 20,000 men. Greybeards and winter wolves, younger sons who would starve if they stayed north, old warriors looking for one last fight. He marched them south through the autumn cold down the King's Road, past the Twins and the Trident, heading for King's Landing and war. But Cregan Stark was not in a hurry. He had learned patience from the north itself. Let the dragons burn each other. Let the Targaryens bleed themselves white. Let the realm tear itself apart. The north remembers, and the north is patient. By the time Cregan and his 20,000 Northmen reached King's Landing in 131, after conquest, the dance was over. Queen Rhaenyra was dead. King Aegon II was dead, poisoned by his own men. The dragons were gone. The realm was broken, and into that broken realm walked a 23-year-old wolf with ice in his veins and a Valyrian steel greatsword in his hands. What happened next would define Cregan Stark forever. They would call it the Hour of the Wolf. 6 days when a northern lord held the entire capital in his fist without spilling a drop of blood. 6 days when the deadliest warrior in Westeros proved that sometimes the sword you do not draw is more terrifying than the sword you swing. But before we get to that moment, we need to understand the man Cregan never met in battle. The warrior who defined what it meant to be deadly for an entire generation. The prince who proved his legend in blood and fire from the stepstones to the God's Eye. We need to talk about Daemon Targaryen. Daemon Targaryen was born in 81 after conquest with dragon blood in his veins and violence in his heart. Second son of Prince Baddilon and Princess Alyssa, younger brother to Viserys, who would one day be king. From the moment he could walk, Daemon wanted one thing: glory. Not the quiet kind you earn through wise rulership. The loud kind you earn through swinging swords and burning your enemies to ash. The Red Keep provided everything a Targaryen prince could want. The finest masters at arms in the Seven Kingdoms taught him to fight. He learned every style, every technique, every dirty trick that separates a good swordsman from a legendary one. And Daemon absorbed it all like a sponge absorbs blood. By the time he was 15, he could beat men twice his age in the training yard. By 20, he had killed his first man in a duel. By 30, he had lost count. But training in a castle yard is not the same as real warfare. Daemon knew that. So when his brother Viserys became king, Daemon asked for command of the city watch, the gold cloaks. Viserys gave it to him, thinking it would keep his younger brother occupied and out of trouble. It did not keep him out of trouble. Daemon reformed the city watch into his personal army, gave them better weapons, better training, better pay, and he led them into the streets of King's Landing. Like a pack of wolves hunting through Flea Bottom, crime dropped because criminals started disappearing. Daemon did not arrest thieves and murderers. He killed them in the streets. In front of witnesses, he wanted everyone to know that the rogue prince was not bound by the same rules as other men. The name stuck, Rogue Prince. Some said it with respect, others with fear. Daemon wore it like armor. When his wife Rhea Royce died in a hunting accident in 115, after conquest, rumors swirled that Daemon had her killed. He had never wanted that marriage, called her his bronze bitch. Refused to visit the Vale. Whether he murdered her or not, the timing was convenient. Within the year he married Laena Velaryon, daughter of the Sea Snake, and finally got what he always wanted, a true Valyrian bride with a dragon of her own. But before Laena, before his second marriage, Daemon carved his legend in a place most lords would never dare to go, the Stepstones. In 106 after conquest, Daemon and Corlys Velaryon launched a private war against the Triarchy, the alliance of free cities that controlled the Stepstones and preyed on Westerosi shipping. This was not a war sanctioned by the Iron Throne. This was Daemon and the Sea Snake deciding they wanted those islands and taking them by force. For 9 years, Daemon fought in the Stepstones. 9 years of brutal island warfare. Beaches stained red with blood, caves filled with corpses. Daemon led men into battle after battle, his dragon Caryxes burning enemy ships to cinders, while Daemon himself waded into the fighting with Dark Sister in hand. They say he took 12 wounds in those years, arrows in the shoulder, sword cuts across his ribs, a spear that nearly took his eye. He wore the scars like medals. The Triarchy sent assassins. Daemon killed them. They sent better assassins. Daemon killed those too. The most famous was Craghas Drohar, the crab feeder, a commander so brutal he would stake his enemies on beaches and let the crabs eat them alive as the tide came in. Daemon hunted him for years through those islands. When he finally found Craghas, he cut the man in half with Dark Sister and fed his body to Craghas's. In 109, after conquest, after 3 years of warfare, Daemon crowned himself king of the Narrow Sea, just declared it. No blessing from his brother, no approval from the small council. He won those islands with blood and dragon fire, so he put a crown on his own head and dared anyone to challenge him. Nobody did. For 6 more years, Daemon ruled his little kingdom in the Stepstones until he got bored and abandoned it in 115. After conquest, let the islands fall back into chaos. He had proven his point. Daemon Targaryen could conquer kingdoms when he felt like it, could crown himself king if he wanted to. And there was not a damn thing anyone could do to stop him. His marriage to Laena Velaryon should have settled him down. They had 2 daughters together, traveled across Essos on their dragons. For a while it seemed like Daemon might actually be happy, but Laena died in childbirth in 120. After conquest, trying to give him a son, she commanded her dragon Varia to burn her rather than die screaming in a birthing bed. Daemon watched his second wife immolate herself and walked away with his daughters, showing no emotion at all. Some men break when they lose someone they love. Daemon just got colder. Within 2 years he married his niece Rhaenyra Targaryen, the heir to the Iron Throne. the woman his brother the king had chosen to succeed him. Daemon had been in love with Rhaenyra since she was a girl. Some say he groomed her. Others say she chose him freely. Either way, by 122, after conquest, the rogue prince was married to the future queen and positioned himself as the power behind her throne. When King Viserys died in 129, after conquest and the Dance of the Dragons began, Daemon was 48 years old by warrior standards. Most men that age retire to their castles and let younger men do the fighting, not Daemon. He strapped on his armor, climbed onto Caraxes, and went to war one last time. For over a year, Daemon waged total war across Westeros. He seized Harrenhal and made it his base of operations. Burned castles, loyal to King Aegon II, led armies in the field, fought battles on the ground and in the air. At 48, then 49, he showed no signs of slowing down. If anything, he got more aggressive, more reckless, like he knew time was running out and wanted to pack as much violence into his remaining years as possible. His stepson, Prince Jacaerys, flew to Winterfell and secured the North's support. Daemon approved. The more armies they could field, the faster they could crush Aegon's forces. But Jacaerys died at the Gullet, and Rhaenyra fled King's Landing after her brief reign, and slowly the war turned against them. The dragons died one by one, the armies bled out, and Daemon found himself at Harrenhal, hearing reports that Prince Aemon Targaryen and his dragon Vhagar were hunting for him. Aemond One-Eye, Daemon's nephew, a younger, stronger dragon rider on the largest dragon in the world. Vhagar was over 180 years old, a living mountain of scales and teeth and fire. Aemond was in his 20s, at the peak of his physical abilities, riding a dragon that had conquered kingdoms. Daemon Targaryen was 49 years old on a smaller dragon. He went to meet Aemond anyway. On the 22nd day of the 5th moon of 130 after conquest, above a lake called the God's Eye, Daemon Targaryen and Aemon Targaryen fought the last dragon duel of the dance. Caraxes and Vhagar collided in mid-air, tearing at each other with claws and teeth while their riders fought for control. The battle was brutal. Vhagar's size advantage should have ended it quickly, but Caraxes fought with a savagery that matched his riders. They locked together, both mortally wounded, plummeting toward the lake below. As they fell, Daemon Targaryen unbuckled himself from his saddle, leaped from Caraxes, landed on Vhagar's neck while both dragons were still falling, climbed up the dying dragon's back while Aemon stared in shock, and drove Dark Sister through his nephew's remaining eye, straight into his brain. Then Daemon Targaryen, Aemon Targaryen, Caraxes and Vhagar all crashed into the God's Eye together. The water swallowed them whole. None of their bodies were ever recovered. Dark Sister was never found. That is how Daemon Targaryen died. Not in his bed, not peacefully surrounded by family. He died the way he lived, leaping from a falling dragon onto another dragon mid-flight, killing his enemy in the most impossible circumstances imaginable, going down locked in combat until the very end. The most dangerous man in the Seven Kingdoms died as the most dangerous man in the Seven Kingdoms, and the realm would never see his like again. Or would it? Because 2,000 miles north, a young wolf was marching south with 20,000 men and a 6-foot Valyrian steel greatsword, a wolf who had never lost a fight in his life. A wolf who would soon show King's Landing that you do not need a dragon to be the deadliest man alive. Let us talk about the swords first, because in any fight between legendary warriors, the weapon matters as much as the man wielding it. Ice. The ancestral greatsword of House Stark, 6 feet of rippling Valyrian steel, dark as smoke, sharp enough to split a hair dropped across its edge. The blade alone weighs as much as a small child. Most men could not even lift ice above their heads, let alone swing it in combat. It takes the kind of strength that only giants and heroes possess. The histories say that ice was forged over 400 years before Cregan Stark was born, passed down through generations of Stark lords who used it to behead criminals and traitors. The blade has tasted so much blood over the centuries that some maesters claim it thirsts for more. When Cregan Stark lifts ice, he does not struggle, does not strain. He grips that 6-foot monster with both hands and swings it like other men swing longswords, fast enough to kill, heavy enough to cleave through armor, shields, even other swords if they try to block. The reach is devastating. A man with ice can kill you from nearly 10 feet away. Stay outside his range, you are safe. Step inside it, you are already dead. Dark Sister is different. Elegant where ice is brutal, 3.5 feet of Valyrian steel, slender and perfectly balanced for speed. Visenya Targaryen carried Dark Sister when she helped her brother Aegon conquer the 7 kingdoms. After her death, it passed to other Targaryen warriors, each one adding to its legend. By the time Daemon Targaryen claimed it, Dark Sister had been killing for over 100 years. The sword thirsted just as much as ice, but for precision kills rather than overwhelming power. Daemon could wield Dark Sister one-handed, leaving his other hand free for a dagger or a shield, or simply grabbing an opponent and pulling them onto his blade. The sword moved like liquid mercury, fast, unpredictable, deadly. Where ice announced itself with huge sweeping cuts that you could see coming from miles away, Dark Sister struck like a viper, quick, surgical. By the time you realized you had been cut, you were already bleeding out. So we have 2 Valyrian steel blades, both legendary, both ancient, both forged in dragonfire and tempered in blood. But they could not be more different in how they kill. Cregan's fighting style evolved from necessity. In the north, you do not have the luxury of fancy swordplay. When wildlings raid south of the wall, you need to end fights quickly before the cold kills you. When you are defending your lands against enemies who outnumber you, you need every advantage you can get: power, reach, intimidation. Cregan learned to use all 3. Watch Cregan fight, and you see economy of motion. No wasted energy, no flourishes. He plants his feet, grips ice with both hands, and waits, patient as winter itself. He controls the distance between himself and his opponent, forces them to come to him. And when they do, when they commit to closing that gap, ice is already moving. 1 swing, maybe 2, the fight is over. The genius of Cregan's style is that it makes you choose how you want to die. Stay back, you never land a hit. Move forward, you walk into a killing blow. Try to circle around him. He pivots and keeps ice between you and him. Try to rush him, hoping to get inside his guard before he can swing that massive blade. And you discover that Cregan is faster than a man his size has any right to be. Ice comes around like a falling tree, and your head is flying through the air before you realize your mistake. Northern fighting is about survival, about ending threats as efficiently as possible. Cregan never learned to duel for sport or glory. He learned to kill people who were trying to kill him. That is a different kind of education. More brutal, more honest. Daemon learned to fight in the Red Keep training yards under the finest masters at arms in Westeros. He studied every style. Westerosi sword and shield, Revosi water dancing, Dothraki Iraq techniques, Essosi curved blades. He absorbed everything, took what worked, discarded what did not. By the time Daemon reached adulthood, he had forgotten more about sword fighting than most knights ever learn. His style is aggressive offense, constant pressure. He does not wait for openings, he creates them. Dark Sister probes your defenses with quick cuts, high, low, left, right, testing your reactions, looking for the moment your guard drops or your footwork slips. And when he finds that moment, Dark Sister is already inside, sliding between your ribs or opening your throat. Watch Daemon fight, and you see controlled chaos. He moves like he is dancing, feet never staying in one place, body always shifting angles. You think he is coming from the right, and he is already on your left. You commit to blocking high, and the blade comes low. Speed and deception, and 35 years of experience reading opponents. Daemon can tell what you are going to do before you know yourself, just from the way you shift your weight or the angle of your shoulders. But there is more to fighting than just technique. Armor matters, environment matters, physical condition matters. Cregan wears heavy northern plate, steel thick enough to turn aside most blows. It slows him down slightly, but not enough to matter when you are fighting with Ice's reach advantage. The armor gives him confidence to trade blows if necessary. Let your sword scrape off his breastplate while Ice opens you from shoulder to hip. Bad trade for the other guy. Daemon wears lighter armor, Dragon Rider practical, leather and light mail that allows full range of motion. He relies on not getting hit rather than absorbing hits. His speed and footwork keep him alive, not thick steel. It is a riskier approach, but it matches his aggressive style. Cannot dance around your opponent if you are wearing 50 pounds of plate. The age difference cannot be ignored. When Cregan is 23, he is at absolute peak physical condition. Fast, strong, endurance for days. His body recovers from exertion almost instantly. He can fight multiple opponents back to back without getting winded. Youth is a hell of a weapon. Daemon at 49 is still formidable. He maintained his conditioning through constant warfare, stayed lean and mean and dangerous. But 49 is not 23. Reflexes slow by fractions of a second. Recovery takes longer. Injuries from decades of fighting add up. Old wounds ache in the cold. The body accumulates damage over time, and no amount of training can completely reverse that. Here is what makes this matchup fascinating though. All of Daemon's advantages are technical, experience, skill, knowledge of different fighting styles, tactical thinking. All of Cregan's advantages are physical, strength, youth, reach, power. In most fights, technical skill beats raw physical ability. A master swordsman defeats a strong amateur every single time. But we are not talking about a master versus an amateur. We are talking about a master versus another master who happens to have overwhelming physical advantages. Imagine the fight. Daemon attacks first, because that is his nature. Dark Sister probes, searching for an opening in Cregan's defense. But Ice is there, that 6-foot blade, creating a wall of steel that Daemon cannot easily penetrate. He tries to circle, but Cregan pivots, keeping Ice between them. The reach advantage is suffocating. Every step Daemon takes forward is a risk. Every commitment to attack is a chance for Cregan to counter with a blow that will cut him in half. Daemon has fought hundreds of opponents in his life, seen every trick, survived every style. But he has never fought someone with Ice's reach who also has Cregan's strength and youth. It is a new problem, one that experience alone might not solve. Cregan, for his part, has never fought anyone with Daemon's speed and experience. The prince is faster than anyone Cregan has faced, more technical, more dangerous. If Daemon gets inside Ice's reach, if he closes that distance and brings Dark Sister into play at close quarters, Cregan is in serious trouble. All the strength in the world does not help if a blade is already inside your guard, angling for your throat. The environmental factors shift everything. In an open field with room to maneuver, Daemon has options, can use his speed and footwork to full advantage, might find a way to close distance without taking a fatal hit. In a confined space, tight quarters where Ice cannot swing freely, Daemon's advantage multiplies. Dark Sister thrives in close combat. Ice becomes a liability when you do not have room to use it properly. In winter, in snow and ice, the North gives Cregan every advantage. Daemon slips on frozen ground, slows down in heavy snow. Cregan has fought in these conditions his entire life, knows how to move, how to balance, how to use the environment. But strip away the environment, put them in a neutral setting, same temperature, same ground, just two men and their swords. That is where the question becomes truly interesting. Because at the end of the day, killing someone with a sword comes down to landing a hit. Daemon needs several good hits, needs to find weak points in Cregan's armor, slice arteries, wear him down. Cregan needs one hit, just one. Ice connects with any part of Daemon's body, even a glancing blow, and the fight is over. Different risk calculations, different paths to victory, both legitimate, both deadly. And neither man has ever lost. When Cregan Stark walked through the gates of King's Landing in 131, after conquest, the city held its breath. 20,000 northern warriors flooded into the capital behind him. Battle-hardened men who had marched 1,000 miles expecting war. Men who had left their families knowing they might never return. Men who wanted blood for Prince Cateris, for Queen Rhaenyra, for all the broken promises and betrayals of the dance. The war was already over. That was the problem. King Aegon II, the man Cregan had marched south to fight, was dead, poisoned by his own supporters just days before the northern army arrived. They had given him wine laced with poison, watched him choke and convulse, then declared peace and crowned the 11-year-old Aegon the Younger as king. Neat, tidy, no more fighting necessary. Except Cregan Stark had not marched 1,000 miles to be told the war was over. Lord Corlys Velaryon, the Sea Snake, the richest and most powerful lord in the realm, had already sent envoys to Casterly Rock, Old Town, and Storm's End, peace terms. Pardons for everyone who bent the knee to the boy king, an end to the bloodshed. The great houses were exhausted. They wanted the killing to stop. Corlys was counting on that exhaustion, counting on everyone being too tired to keep fighting. He had not counted on the North. Cregan took one look at the situation and understood exactly what had happened. These men, these lords and knights and schemers who surrounded the child king, had murdered Aegon II to save their own skins, regicide, the murder of a king, and now they wanted to pretend it never happened. Wanted to wash their hands and move forward like the blood was not still fresh on their fingers. The North does not forgive regicide. Within hours of entering the city, Cregan Stark took control. Not through violence, not through threats. He simply walked into the Red Keep with his commanders at his back, and every single person in that throne room understood that the balance of power had shifted. The boy king, Aegon III, was confined to Maegor's holdfast for his own protection. The small council was dismissed, and Cregan Stark held court from the steps of the Iron Throne itself. They called it the Hour of the Wolf. 6 days when a northern lord ruled the capital without sitting the throne. 6 days when justice came to King's Landing in the form of a 23-year-old with a 6-foot Valyrian steel greatsword. The remaining Green Lords sent word that they would not continue the war. Women at court whispered for peace. Everyone wanted this to end. Cregan listened to all of it, nodded, then explained that he had not marched south for peace. He had marched south for justice, and justice would be served. Lord Corlys Velaryon, the Sea Snake himself, was the first man Cregan arrested. This was a lord who had ruled the seas for decades, who had more wealth than some kingdoms, who had the blood of dragons flowing through his granddaughters. Corlys had assumed his position and power would protect him. Cregan Stark did not care about position or power. 22 men in total were arrested and charged with the murder of King Aegon II. Some had poisoned the wine. Others had stood by and let it happen. Others had conspired in the plot. Cregan saw no difference between them. You kill a king, or you allow a king to be killed, you are guilty either way. Among those arrested was Lord Larry Strong, the twisted little man who had served as Master of Whisperers and had orchestrated more deaths than anyone could count. Sir Giles Belgrave of the King's Guard, Sir Perkin the Flea, an up-jumped sellsword, and Lord Corley's Velaryon. The city waited to see what Cregan would do. Some expected him to execute all 22 men immediately. Others thought he would use the arrests as leverage, make deals, play the Game of Thrones the way it had always been played. They did not understand Cregan Stark. He was not playing a game, he was delivering justice. The young king's half-sisters, Baela and Rhaenys Targaryen, pleaded for Lord Corlys's life. He was their grandfather, a hero of the realm, a man who had fought for their mother, Rhaenyra. Surely his service earned him mercy. Cregan heard their pleas and said nothing. It was Alysanne Blackwood who changed his mind. Black Alice, they called her, a daughter of the Riverlands with a spine of iron and a tongue sharp enough to cut. She had caught Cregan's attention the moment he arrived in King's Landing, not because she was beautiful, though she was, not because she was charming, though she could be, but because she spoke to him like an equal, did not flinch from his presence the way most southern ladies did not simper or flatter or manipulate. She told him the truth. When Alysanne asked for mercy for Lord Corlys, Cregan considered it. Here was a woman worth listening to, a woman who reminded him of his dead wife Ara. When she finished speaking, Cregan made an offer: spare Lord Corlys and marry him. Bind House Stark to House Blackwood. Give him a reason to show mercy. Alysanne Blackwood agreed. Just like that, one of the most powerful lords in the realm was spared, not because of his granddaughter's tears, not because of his wealth or position, because a northern lord wanted to marry a Riverlands woman, and she asked nicely. The remaining 21 men faced their judgment. 19 of them, led by Sir Perkin the Flea, chose to take the black, join the Night's Watch, live out their lives on the wall, freezing and fighting and forgetting they had ever been lords or knights. Cregan accepted their choice. The wall always needed men. 2 men refused. Sir Giles Belgrave and Lord Larry Strong chose execution over a life of frozen misery. Cregan respected that choice too. At least they were honest about it. On the day of the executions, Cregan Stark carried ice himself to the courtyard of the Red Keep. The crowd gathered, lords and ladies, small folk, everyone who wanted to see if the Wolf of the North would actually do it, would actually execute men himself rather than having a headsman do it. They did not know Cregan Stark, did not understand that in the North, the man who passes the sentence swings the sword. It is easy to order someone's death from a throne, harder to look them in the eye and do it yourself. Cregan had learned that lesson from his father. If you are not willing to kill a man yourself, maybe that man should not die. Sir Giles Belgrave knelt first. Cregan spoke no words, gave no speech. He simply raised ice above his head and brought it down. The Valyrian steel was so sharp that Belgrave's head came off clean. One stroke, the body toppled. The crowd gasped. Lord Larry Strong was next. The club-footed spymaster, who had whispered poison into ears for years, who had orchestrated murders and betrayals too numerous to count, who had smiled while good men died. Larry knelt. Ice rose, ice fell. Another head rolled across the stones. Justice was served. The day after the executions, Cregan Stark resigned as Hand of the King. He had served officially for 1 day, the day he had passed judgment and swung the sword. That was all the time he needed. The boy king was installed properly on the throne. The traitors were punished. The realm had a chance to heal. Cregan's work was done. Within a fortnight, he married Alysanne Blackwood in a ceremony attended by lords from across the Seven Kingdoms. Then he turned his army north and marched home. Many of his men stayed in the south, found wives at the widow fairs in the Riverlands, took positions as guards and men-at-arms, made new lives because going back north meant starving through the winter. Cregan Stark returned to Winterfell with his new wife, his honor intact, and his reputation cemented forever. He had walked into the Viper's Nest of King's Landing and walked out unscathed, had imposed his will on the entire realm without spilling unnecessary blood, had shown that true power does not come from dragons or gold or armies. True power comes from being the kind of man that other men fear to cross. The hour of the wolf lasted 6 days, but the legend of Cregan Stark would last forever. And not once in those 6 days did he draw ice in anger. The sword stayed sheathed, except for the executions, because the deadliest warriors are the ones who do not need to fight. Their presence is enough. While Cregan Stark was still learning to walk, Daemon Targaryen was already building his legend in blood and fire. The Stepstones campaign began in 106 after conquest, when Daemon was 25 years old, young enough to be reckless, old enough to be dangerous. The perfect age for a man looking to carve his name into history. The Triarchy controlled the Stepstones, a chain of rocky islands between Westeros and Essos. Pirates and slavers used those islands as bases to prey on shipping lanes. They were costing the Seven Kingdoms a fortune in lost trade. King Viserys, Daemon's brother, complained about it but did nothing. So Daemon and Lord Corlys Velaryon decided to do something themselves. This was not a sanctioned military campaign. This was two powerful men with dragons and ships deciding they wanted those islands and taking them by force. Daemon sailed to the Stepstones with Caraxes. Corlys brought his fleet, and for 9 years they waged a brutal war of island hopping and naval combat. The fighting was savage. Beach landings under arrow fire, caves full of ambushes, naval battles where burning ships lit up the night sky. Daemon led from the front in every engagement, not from the safety of Caraxes' back. He waded into the fighting with Dark Sister, killed men face to face, took wounds that would have ended lesser warriors. The Triarchy sent their best commander to stop him, Craghas Drahar, the crab feeder, a man so cruel that he would stake prisoners on beaches at low tide and let the crabs eat them alive as the water rose. For 3 years, Craghas and Daemon hunted each other through those islands, ambushes and counter-ambushes, raids and counter-raids, the kind of personal war that becomes legendary. When Daemon finally cornered Craghas Drahar in 109 after conquest, the stories say he cut the man in half with a single swing of Dark Sister, fed the body to Caraxes, piece by piece, then crowned himself king of the Narrow Sea, just declared himself king of the islands he had conquered. No one gave him permission, no one blessed it. Daemon Targaryen decided he was a king, so he became one. For 6 more years, he ruled those rocks, fought off attempts by the Triarchy to take them back, built something that resembled a kingdom out of pirates and sellswords and bastards. Then in 115, after conquest, he got bored and abandoned the whole thing, let it fall back into chaos. The Stepstones had served their purpose. Daemon had proven he could conquer and rule if he wanted to. That was enough. But the Stepstones were just practice. The real test came 14 years later, when the Dance of the Dragons began. Daemon was 48 years old when King Viserys died, and the succession crisis ignited. His wife Rhaenyra was the named heir, the king's eldest child, chosen by Viserys himself to succeed him. But Rhaenyra was a woman, and the realm had never been ruled by a queen in her own right. When Viserys died, his widow Alicent Hightower and her supporters crowned Rhaenyra's half-brother Aegon instead. War was inevitable. Daemon could have stayed on Dragonstone, could have let younger men do the fighting. At 48, most warriors would consider themselves past their prime, not Daemon. He strapped on his armor, climbed onto Caraxes, and went to war like he was 25 again. His first major move was seizing Harrenhal, the largest castle in Westeros, a place so vast that no garrison could properly defend it. Daemon flew there on Caraxes, landed in the courtyard, and demanded the castle surrender. The castellan took one look at the bloodworm and handed over the keys. Smart man. Harrenhal became Daemon's base of operations for the entire war. From Harrenhal, Daemon coordinated the Blacks' military strategy in the Riverlands, burned castles loyal to Aegon, led armies in the field, fought in battles on the ground and in the air. At 48, then 49, he showed no signs of slowing down. If anything, he got more aggressive, more willing to take risks, like he knew his time was running out and wanted to accomplish as much as possible before age caught up with him. The Dance of the Dragons was brutal in ways previous wars had not been. Dragon fought dragon. Whole cities burned, armies clashed, and entire bloodlines were wiped out. Daemon thrived in it. This was the war he had been training for his entire life. Total warfare with no rules and no mercy. But wars have costs. Prince Jacaerys died at the Battle of the Gullet. Rhaenyra's other sons fell one by one. The dragons died. Rhaenyra herself was forced to flee King's Landing after a brief reign, only to be killed and fed to her half-brother's dragon. The Blacks were losing, slowly, inevitably. Daemon remained at Harrenhal, heard the reports, understood that the war was slipping away. And then word came that Prince Aemon Targaryen and his dragon Vhagar were hunting for him. Aemon One Eye, Daemon's nephew. A warrior in his 20s riding the largest dragon in the world. Vhagar was over 180 years old, a living mountain. The dragon that had conquered Dawn, that had burned armies and castles. Aemon was young, strong, fearless, and riding an unkillable monster. Any sane man would have run, found allies, gathered forces, made a plan. Daemon Targaryen flew to meet Aemon alone. On the 22nd day of the 5th moon of 130, after conquest, the two dragon riders met above the God's Eye, a massive lake in the Riverlands, deep enough that the bottom had never been found, old enough that legends said the children of the forest had drowned armies there during the Age of Heroes. The dragons saw each other across the sky and attacked immediately. No words exchanged between the riders, no challenges shouted, just pure violence. Caraxes slammed into Vhagar with a scream that could be heard for miles. The bloodworm lived up to his name, tore at Vhagar's throat with his teeth, ripped chunks of flesh from the larger dragon's wings, fought with a savagery that matched his rider's fury. Vhagar was bigger, stronger, more armored by age and thick scales. She should have won quickly, but Caraxes was fast and vicious and refused to let go. The two dragons locked together, claws embedded in each other's flesh, teeth sunk into each other's necks, both mortally wounded, both falling. As they plummeted toward the lake, Daemon Targaryen made a decision. He unbuckled the straps holding him to his saddle, stood up on Caraxes' back, while the dragon was falling from the sky, and leaped, jumped from his dying dragon onto Vhagar, landed on the larger dragon's neck, grabbed onto her scales, and started climbing. Aemon saw him coming, drew his sword, but Daemon was already moving, climbing up Vhagar's thrashing neck, while both dragons fell, the wind screaming, the ground rushing up, every instinct telling him this was suicide. Daemon reached Aemon's saddle. The young prince swung at him. Daemon ducked, drove Dark Sister forward with both hands. The Valyrian steel blade punched through Aemon's skull, straight through his remaining good eye, into his brain. Aemond One Eye died instantly. Daemon Targaryen kept driving the blade deeper, making sure. Then he pulled Dark Sister free, and both dragons, both riders, all 4 bodies crashed into the God's Eye together. The impact was so massive it created waves that reached the shore. Fishermen miles away felt the water shake. Neither Daemon's body nor Aemon's was ever recovered. The dragons sank to the bottom of that endless lake. Dark Sister disappeared with them. Some say it is still down there, waiting for someone brave enough or foolish enough to dive into those black waters and claim it. Daemon Targaryen was 49 years old when he died. Not in his bed, not peacefully. He died leaping from a falling dragon onto another dragon, killing his enemy in the most impossible circumstances imaginable, going down locked in mortal combat. The Maesters would later calculate that from the moment Daemon leaped to the moment he drove Dark Sister through Aemon's eye, he had perhaps 3 seconds. 3 seconds to cross from one dragon to another, to dodge a sword strike, to kill a man, all while falling through the sky towards certain death. Most men cannot do what Daemon Targaryen did in those 3 seconds in their entire lives. That is the difference between a warrior and a legend. Warriors fight and kill and die. Legends do the impossible and make it look inevitable. Daemon Targaryen spent 35 years proving he was deadly. In his final 3 seconds, he proved he was legend. And somewhere in the north, a young wolf was marching south to clean up the mess Daemon's war had created. 2 men who would never meet, 2 legends who would never fight, 2 different answers to the same question. What does it mean to be the deadliest warrior alive? Understanding how a man leads tells you how he fights. Leadership and combat are not separate skills. They are the same skill applied differently. The way Cregan Stark commanded armies reveals everything about how he would approach single combat. The way Daemon Targaryen led men into battle shows exactly how he would kill you face to face. Cregan led by example, but not the way most lords do. He did not lead from the front to look brave or earn glory. He led from the front because that is where the work happens. When northern lords gathered at Winterfell to discuss defense of the wall, Cregan was there. When rangers came back from beyond the wall with news of wildling movements, Cregan listened personally. When recruits for the Night's Watch needed escorting to Castle Black, Cregan sometimes went himself. This created loyalty that could not be bought or commanded. Northern lords followed Cregan because he treated them like partners, not subjects. Common soldiers fought for him because they knew he would never ask them to do something he would not do himself. When he marched 20,000 men south during the dance, those men followed because Cregan Stark had earned their respect through years of shared hardship. His strategic thinking was patient to the point of frustration. Other lords wanted immediate results. Cregan wanted the right results. When Prince Jacaerys flew to Winterfell, asking for northern support, Cregan could have sent men immediately. Instead, he waited. Watched the war develop, let the dragons burn each other. Arrived at King's Landing at exactly the moment when his army would have maximum impact with minimum bloodshed. That kind of patience requires confidence. You have to believe that waiting is the right choice even when everyone is screaming for action. Cregan had that confidence. Born from years of ruling the north, of preparing for winters that might not come for years, of knowing that hasty decisions in the north get people killed. In personal matters, Cregan kept his word absolutely. The Pact of Ice and Fire died when Prince Jacaerys died. No one would have blamed Cregan for staying north, but he marched anyway. Kept his promise to a dead man. That kind of honor is rare, the kind that costs you something, the kind that makes people trust you even when it hurts. But Cregan's honor had limits. He imprisoned his own uncle, arrested Lord Corlys Velaryon despite the man's power and influence, executed men personally, without hesitation. The North taught Cregan that honor and mercy are different things. You keep your word, you treat people fairly, but you do not let honor prevent you from doing what needs to be done. Sometimes the honorable thing is also the brutal thing. Daemon led differently. He inspired through personal charisma and shared danger. Men followed Daemon because he was exciting, because following him meant glory and plunder and stories to tell. Because Daemon did not ask his men to take risks, he took bigger risks himself and dared them to keep up. In the Stepstones, Daemon led beach assaults personally. First one off the boat, first one into the enemy. His men saw him bleeding from arrow wounds and kept fighting, saw him charging into overwhelming odds and charged with him. That kind of leadership works, creates fierce loyalty. But it also creates casualties. Daemon did not preserve his men's lives the way Cregan did. He spent them, used them up like arrows, always confident there would be more. His strategic thinking was aggressive to the point of recklessness. Seizing Harrenhal early in the dance was brilliant, gave the Blacks a major strategic asset, and terrified Aegon's supporters. But Daemon held Harrenhal almost alone for much of the war, left it vulnerable, relied on the psychological impact of his presence more than actual military strength that works until it does not. Flying to meet Amund One-Eye alone above the God's Eye was either the boldest military decision of the war or the stupidest, probably both. Daemon saw an enemy he wanted to kill and flew straight at him. No backup, no plan beyond violence. It worked because Daemon was good enough and lucky enough to make it work. But luck runs out. Strategy based on being better than everyone eventually meets someone just as good. Daemon's relationship with rules was simple. He ignored them, crowned himself king without permission, married his niece when it was scandalous, led unauthorized wars, did whatever he wanted, and dared anyone to stop him. That kind of freedom is intoxicating, also dangerous. When you live outside the rules long enough, you forget that other people still follow them, makes you vulnerable to unexpected moves. The difference in character shows most clearly in how they handled power. Cregan walked into King's Landing with overwhelming military force and could have declared himself hand for life, could have made himself the true power behind the child king. Instead, he served for one day, did what needed doing, then went home. Power did not tempt him because power was not the point. Justice was the point. Daemon spent his entire life seeking power and glory, wanted to be king, wanted to be remembered, wanted his name to echo through history. He got what he wanted, but it cost him everything. His wives, his nephews, his life. The glory Daemon chased killed him in the end. Both men were deadly, but their deadliness came from different sources. Cregan was deadly because nothing rattled him. No threat, no offer, no temptation. You could not bribe him or scare him or manipulate him. The only way to stop Cregan Stark was to kill him, and no one ever managed it. Daemon was deadly because he had nothing to lose, charged into fights that should have killed him and survived through skill and madness. That kind of warrior is terrifying, cannot be reasoned with, cannot be deterred. You either kill him or he kills you. No third option. Here is what makes the comparison fascinating. In a long campaign, you want Cregan leading your army, patient, strategic, preserves his forces, wins through superior positioning and timing. In a short, desperate fight, where everything depends on one bold move, you want Daemon, willing to risk everything, makes the impossible seem possible through sheer audacity. But in single combat, those leadership styles translate directly to fighting styles. Cregan's patience becomes defensive mastery, waiting for the perfect counter, never committing until he is certain. Daemon's aggression becomes overwhelming offense, constant pressure, force the enemy into mistakes. One man survived to old age, ruled Winterfell for decades, died in his bed surrounded by family. The other died at 49, locked in combat with his enemy, plummeting into a lake. Both men got the death they earned, the death that matched their lives. Cregan lived long because he was careful, thought ahead, never took unnecessary risks. Daemon died young because he chased glory until glory killed him. Neither approach is wrong. They are just different answers to the question of how a warrior should live. But we are not asking how they should live. We are asking who would win in a fight. And that is where character matters. Because in the moment when steel meets steel, when you are staring at another warrior who wants to kill you, your character decides what you do. Does Cregan's patience let him wait for the perfect counter, or does Daemon's aggression overwhelm him before he can react? Does Daemon's recklessness create an opening Cregan exploits, or does Daemon's experience read Cregan's defense and find a way through? Character is not separate from skill. Character is skill. The man you are determines how you fight. And both these men were exactly who they needed to be to become legends. History is full of near misses. Moments where two legends almost met. Battles that never happened because timing or fate intervened. The Dance of the Dragons was one of those moments. Daemon Targaryen died in 130. After conquest, Cregan Stark arrived in King's Landing in 131 after conquest. 1 year apart. Two men who defined their era, separated by 12 months and the width of a kingdom. But what if the timing had been different? Imagine Cregan arriving at King's Landing while Daemon still lived. The northern army flooding into the capital, while the rogue prince held Harrenhal, two legendary warriors on the same side of a war, 20,000 Northmen, backed by the deadliest dragon rider in Westeros. That combination would have been unstoppable. The war would have ended in weeks, not years. Daemon's aggressive dragon strike supported by Cregan's disciplined ground forces, Carax's burning enemy positions while northern infantry secured them. The Greens would have been crushed. Daemon provided the fire, Cregan provided the iron. Together they would have been the perfect war machine. All speed and power, with no weaknesses. But the interesting question is not whether they could fight together. The interesting question is whether they would have stayed allies. Cregan Stark and Daemon Targaryen were too similar in some ways, both proud, both unwilling to bend, both accustomed to being the most dangerous man in any room. That kind of personality does not share power easily. Eventually they would have clashed, not over strategy, over respect, over who deferred to whom, over which legend was greater. Picture the scene. The war is won. Aegon the Younger is on the throne. Daemon and Cregan stand in the throne room, surrounded by lesser lords who know their place. Someone needs to serve as Hand of the King. Someone needs to rule in the boy's name. Both men have the strength to take it. Both men have the reputation to hold it. Only one can have it. Daemon was 49, had fought for the crown, married the queen, earned his position through blood and dragonfire. He would not step aside for some northern lord half his age, no matter how impressive that lord might be. Cregan was 23, had marched 1,000 miles, brought the army that secured the peace, represented the largest kingdom in Westeros. He would not bow to a Targaryen prince just because the prince had a dragon. In that moment, with both men refusing to yield, what happens? Do they share power? Does one back down, or does it come to violence? If it came to violence, if they actually fought, Caraxes changes everything. Daemon on his dragon versus Cregan and his entire army. Not a fair fight, not even close. Dragons do not lose to men on the ground, No matter how many men or how well trained, Cregan would need to kill Daemon without facing the dragon. Assassination, poison, something dishonorable that a Stark would never do. So remove the dragon. Imagine Daemon without Caraxes. Just two warriors facing each other in single combat. That fight becomes real. That fight becomes interesting. The setting matters. An open field gives Daemon room to maneuver. His speed and footwork work better when he has space. But Icy's reach advantage is still massive. Every step Daemon takes forward risks walking into a killing blow. Even with room to move, closing that 2.5-foot gap between Dark Sister's reach and Icy's reach is a problem that experience alone might not solve. Confined quarters change everything. A castle corridor, a throne room, anywhere ice cannot swing freely. That environment favors Dark Sister. Daemon gets inside Cregan's guard, uses his speed, turns the fight into close quarters brutality where Cregan's strength matters less than Daemon's technique. Winter in the north would be murder for Daemon. Literally, fighting in snow and ice when you have spent your entire life in castles and warm climates. Cregan has been training in winter conditions since childhood, knows how to move on ice, how to keep his footing in snow, how to use cold as a weapon. Daemon would be slipping and sliding while Cregan glided forward like death on skates. But neutral ground, same temperature, same conditions, just two men and their swords. That is where the question becomes truly fascinating. Daemon at 49 versus Cregan at 23. Experience versus youth. Speed versus power. The prince who had killed hundreds versus the lord who had never lost. One man trying to cement his legend, another trying to prove his. The fight would start with Daemon attacking. That is his nature. Dark Sister probing for openings, testing Cregan's defense, looking for the mistake or hesitation that creates an opportunity. Daemon has fought enough opponents to read patterns, see the telegraph in shoulder movement or foot placement. He knows how to create openings when none exist. Cregan responds with patience, lets Daemon probe, uses ice to control distance, forces the prince to commit further forward with each attack, waiting for the moment when Daemon overextends, when the aggressive offense leaves him exposed. Cregan has all day, all week. He is 23 years old with endurance for days. Let the old man tire himself out. But Daemon is not some old man. He is 49 years old with 35 years of combat experience. He knows endurance fights favor youth, so he does not tire himself out. He picks his moments, conserves energy between attacks, uses his experience to minimize wasted movement, makes Cregan work for every defensive parry. The psychological warfare is as important as the physical. Daemon tries to bait Cregan into attacking, makes openings that look real, but are traps, wants the young lord to commit to offense so Daemon can counter. Cregan refuses the bait, stays defensive, forces Daemon to come to him. Minutes pass. Then longer, both men circling, both waiting. Daemon is getting frustrated. His style depends on overwhelming opponents quickly. Every minute this fight continues is a minute Cregan's youth becomes more of an advantage. Daemon needs to take risks, press harder, force the issue. That is when mistakes happen. When frustration overrides experience. When the need to win creates openings that skill alone would never allow. Daemon presses forward, Dark Sister flashing, multiple angles, combinations designed to overwhelm defenses, and Cregan is there, ice moving, blocking, parrying, waiting. One of them connects. Either Daemon's speed finds a gap in Cregan's defense and Dark Sister slides between ribs, or Cregan times one perfect counter and ice comes around like a falling tree, catching Daemon mid-attack. Someone goes down. Someone does not get back up. The historical record cannot tell us who. Both men were undefeated. Both men were legendary. Both men had legitimate claims to being the deadliest warrior of their generation. The only way to know for certain would have been for them to fight, and they never did. But we can make educated guesses based on what we know. Physical advantages tend to matter more than skill advantages when both fighters are already masters. Daemon's experience is real. His speed is real. His speed is real. His tactical knowledge is real. But Cregan's youth is real. His strength is real. Ice's reach advantage is real. In a perfect world, they would have fought 100 times under different conditions. We would have data, statistics, proof. But we do not live in a perfect world. We live in a world where legends never met, where the greatest warriors of an age died without facing each other, where we are left with questions that history refuses to answer. So we guess, we theorize, we imagine. And maybe that is better. Maybe not knowing is what keeps legends alive. Now we come to the moment of truth. Everything we have discussed, every fact we have examined, every advantage and disadvantage, it all comes down to one question. If Cregan Stark and Daemon Targaryen had fought in single combat with no dragons and no armies, just two men and their Valyrian steel blades, who would have walked away alive? Let us be honest about what we are comparing. On one side, Daemon Targaryen at 49 years old, a warrior prince with 35 years of combat experience, countless confirmed kills, a man who fought on 3 continents and survived battles that should have killed him a dozen times over. Speed, technique, and tactical genius honed through decades of actual warfare. Dark Sister in his hands, 3.5 feet of Valyrian steel that has been killing for over a century. On the other side, Cregan Stark, at 23 years old, a northern lord in absolute peak physical condition, undefeated his entire life. Legendary strength even among Northmen, ice in his hands. 6 feet of Valyrian steel that requires giant strength just to lift. Youth, power, and reach advantage that borders on unfair. The physical comparison is not even close. Cregan is taller, stronger, younger, and wielding a weapon with nearly double the reach. In pure athletics, Cregan wins every category except speed and agility. Daemon is faster, more nimble, better footwork, but those advantages have limits when you are facing someone who can kill you from 10 feet away. That reach advantage is the key to everything. 2.5 feet might not sound like much, but in a sword fight, 2.5 feet is the difference between life and death. It means Daemon has to get inside Cregan's range to land any strike, has to cross that gap without getting hit even once, because one hit from ice ends the fight. The sword is too heavy. The blade is too sharp. The power behind it is too great. Ice does not wound, it kills. Dark Sister needs multiple hits, needs to find weak points in armor, needs precision strikes to arteries or vital organs. Daemon can cut Cregan 5 times, and Cregan keeps fighting. Cregan can cut Daemon once, and it is over. Different risk equations, different paths to victory. But experience matters. It has to. 35 years of killing people is not nothing. Daemon has seen every fighting style, faced every type of opponent, survived situations that would have killed anyone else. That kind of experience teaches you things that cannot be learned in training yards. Teaches you how to read micro-expressions, how to feel when an opponent is about to commit, how to create openings through psychological pressure. Cregan has 10 years of experience as a lord, fought wildlings and northern criminals, trained since childhood under the best northern warriors, but he has not fought the variety of opponents Daemon has not been tested in as many different circumstances. Raw talent and physical gifts can only take you so far. At some point, experience should matter. Except when the physical advantages are too overwhelming. When you are giving up 2.5 feet of reach, 26 years of age, and fighting someone who can swing a 6-foot greatsword one-handed, at that point, experience might not be enough. Think about the actual mechanics of the fight. Daemon needs to close distance. Every step forward is a risk. Tice is always there, controlling the space between them. Cregan does not even need to attack. Just hold the sword out and force Daemon to go around it. Daemon circles, probes, looks for an angle. Cregan pivots, keeps ice between them, patient as winter. Daemon knows he is on a clock. Every minute that passes is a minute his age becomes more of a factor. He is 49. Not old, but not young. Fighting a 23-year-old in peak condition. In a war of endurance, youth wins. Daemon has to force the issue, has to take risks, has to create opportunities through aggression. That is when Cregan counters. Daemon commits to closing distance, moves forward fast. Dark Sister ready to strike the moment he gets inside Ice's range, and Ice is already moving, coming around in a massive arc that Daemon has to dodge or die. Daemon dodges, barely feels the wind from the blade, realizes how close he just came to being cut in half. This is the problem Daemon faces. Every attempt to get close almost gets him killed. Meanwhile, Cregan is not even breathing hard, just standing there, holding ice, waiting. He can do this all day. Daemon cannot. But Daemon Targaryen did not become the most dangerous man in the Seven Kingdoms by giving up when things got hard. He finds another angle, uses his footwork, creates a different opening. Maybe he feints high and goes low. Maybe he draws Cregan into overcommitting. Maybe he just gets lucky. Whatever the method, Daemon gets inside Ice's reach. Now the fight is happening at Dark Sister's range. Close quarters. Daemon's advantage. His speed pays off. Dark Sister flashing. Multiple strikes from multiple angles, testing Cregan's armor, looking for joints and gaps. This is where experience should dominate. Daemon has fought in close quarters 1,000 times, knows every trick, every technique. But Cregan is stronger than anyone Daemon has ever fought. When Daemon tries to grapple to control Cregan's weapon hand, Cregan just powers through it, throws Daemon back with raw strength, creates distance again, and ice is back in play. The reach advantage returns. This pattern repeats. Daemon gets close, does some damage, gets thrown back, has to start over. Each time he gets close, he risks everything. Each time Cregan pushes him back, Daemon gets a little more tired, a little slower. The age gap becomes more apparent. Youth wins wars of attrition. Experience might win decisive moments. But this fight is not one decisive moment. It is a series of exchanges where one man has overwhelming physical advantages and the other has to be perfect every single time. Perfect is hard to maintain, especially at 49, especially against someone who never gets tired and can kill you with one mistake. So here is the verdict. And understand this is based on probability, not certainty, based on advantages and disadvantages, based on what we know about both men and how fights actually work. In single combat, no dragons, both men at the ages they were during the Dance of the Dragons. Neutral environment, Cregan Stark wins 65% of the time, maybe 70%. Not because Daemon is not skilled enough, not because his experience does not matter, but because the physical advantages are too large. The reach is too much. The youth is too much. The strength is too much. All of Daemon's technical skill, all of his experience, all of his tactical brilliance cannot fully overcome the simple fact that Cregan can kill him from further away, hit harder, and fight longer. Daemon wins 35% of the time through experience finding openings that youth does not see coming, through speed creating moments that strength cannot answer. through technique overcoming raw physical ability. It is possible, just less probable. If Daemon was 30 instead of 49, the odds shift. If the fight was in confined quarters, the odds shift. If Cregan made a mistake early, everything changes. But with all factors at their historical baseline, Cregan is favored. But here is what matters more than the odds. Both men were legends. Both men earned their reputations. Both men were deadly enough that this fight could go either way. The fact that we are debating it, the fact that reasonable people can argue for either side, that alone proves both men belong in the same conversation. Daemon Targaryen was the most dangerous man in the Seven Kingdoms. Until he met someone who might have been more dangerous, we will never know for certain. And maybe that is the point. Legends are not about certainty. They are about possibility, about imagining what could have been, about debating questions that history refuses to answer. Cregan wins the fight, but Daemon wins the legend, and in the end, legends matter more than fights. Legends do not die. Bodies die. Reputations fade. But legends, true legends, they live forever. They become something more than the men who created them. They become ideas, symbols, archetypes that define what it means to be a warrior. Cregan Stark became the northern ideal. The lord who leads by example, who keeps his word even when it costs him, who rules with justice and strength in equal measure. Every Stark lord who came after him tried to be Cregan. Every northern warrior compared himself to the Wolf of Winterfell. When Ned Stark executed a deserter from the Night's Watch centuries later, swinging ice himself, he was following Cregan's example. The man who passes the sentence swings the sword. That is Cregan's legacy. That single principle that defined northern justice for generations. The Hour of the Wolf became legend. Not because Cregan killed anyone, because he did not have to. 6 days when the deadliest warrior in Westeros held the capital without drawing his sword. That kind of power, the power of presence and reputation, that became the standard. True strength does not announce itself, does not need to prove itself. It simply is. Years later, when Meisters wrote about Cregan Stark, they struggled to explain how a 23-year-old achieved what he did. How he walked into a city full of dragons and schemers and soldiers and imposed his will through force of personality. The answer is simpler than they wanted to admit. Cregan was who he said he was. No deception, no games, just pure northern honesty backed by absolute capability. That kind of authenticity cannot be faked. People recognize it, respect it, fear it. Cregan lived to old age, married 3 times, had many children, ruled Winterfell for decades, saw his grandchildren grow. The histories say that later in life, Prince Aemon the Dragon Knight, considered the finest knight of his generation, said that Cregan Stark was the finest swordsman he had ever faced. High praise from a legendary warrior, proof that even in old age, Cregan remained formidable. When Cregan Stark finally died, he died in his bed, surrounded by family, at peace. No dramatic final battle, no glorious death in combat, just the quiet end of a long life well lived. Some warriors would consider that a failure, not glorious enough, not memorable enough. But Cregan Stark did not live for glory. He lived for duty, for family, for the North, and he succeeded in all 3. His legacy to House Stark was stability, honor, strength without cruelty, leadership without tyranny. The Starks remained powerful for centuries partly because Cregan set the standard, showed them what a lord should be. Future Starks failed that standard sometimes, but they always knew what they were failing to live up to. That matters. Daemon Targaryen became something different. He became the warrior prince, the reckless hero, the man who lived by his own rules, and died on his own terms. Daemon represents glory over survival, action over patience. The warrior's life lived to its fullest and deadliest extreme. The Dance of the Dragons killed most of the participants, horrible deaths, burned alive, poisoned, murdered by their own men. Daemon got the warrior's death, died in combat against his greatest enemy, took that enemy with him, fell from the sky locked in mortal battle. That is the death songs are written about. That is the death warriors dream of. Daemon's legacy to House Targaryen was complicated. He showed them what a warrior prince could accomplish, but he also showed them the cost. Daemon destroyed as much as he built, started wars, broke kingdoms, left chaos in his wake. Future Targaryens who tried to emulate him often ended up dead. Because Daemon's path requires being Daemon, and there was only one of him. The Rogue Prince title stuck for a reason. Daemon operated outside normal structures, refused to be controlled or contained. That kind of freedom is powerful, also destructive. Daemon won battles but cost the realm dearly, killed enemies but created new ones. His life was glorious, also tragic. And the Targaryens never quite figured out whether to celebrate him or learn from his mistakes. What makes these two legacies fascinating is how different they are. Cregan built, Daemon destroyed. Cregan preserved, Daemon consumed. Cregan represented the stable foundation civilizations need. Daemon represented the chaotic energy that tears civilizations apart. Both are necessary. Both are dangerous. The North remembers Cregan with pride. He is one of their greatest lords, the example they point to when they talk about northern superiority, the proof that they do not need dragons or southern wealth to be powerful, just honor and strength and ice-cold determination. Cregan validated everything the North believes about itself. The South remembers Daemon with mixture of awe and horror. He was everything a Targaryen should be. Beautiful, deadly, confident to the point of arrogance. But also everything a Targaryen should not be. Reckless, destructive, unable to build anything that lasted. Daemon was the dragon made flesh, magnificent, terrible, ultimately consuming itself in fire. Here is what both men teach us though. There is no single path to legend. Cregan became legend through restraint, through being deadly, but choosing not to kill, through power held in reserve. Daemon became legend through action, through killing everyone who challenged him, through power unleashed without restraint. Both paths work. Both create stories that last forever. The debate about who would win in a fight misses the larger point. They both already won. One at life, one at creating legacies that outlived them, one at becoming symbols that future generations look to for inspiration. Whether Cregan could beat Daemon in single combat is interesting. That both men became legends is what matters. Westeros produced many warriors, thousands of knights and soldiers and killers. Most are forgotten, their names lost to time, their deeds unrecorded. But Cregan Stark and Daemon Targaryen are remembered, will be remembered forever. That is victory. That is what it means to be deadly. Not just killing enemies, but killing the idea that you can be forgotten, making yourself immortal through deed and reputation and legend. The Wolf of Winterfell and the Rogue Prince, two men who never met, two legends that will never die. Two different answers to the eternal question. What does it mean to be a warrior? What does it mean to be deadly? What does it mean to matter? Both men answered that question with their lives, and both answers were correct. So we have traveled through two lives, examined two legends, weighed every advantage and disadvantage, considered every factor that matters in combat. Now we arrive at the final answer. The question that brought you here. Who was the deadlier warrior, Cregan Stark or Daemon Targaryen? If we strip away the dragons, remove the armies, put them in a neutral setting with just their swords and their skills, If we make them fight at the ages they were during their prime moments in history, Cregan at 23 with Ice, Daemon at 49 with Dark Sister, the answer is Cregan Stark. 65 to 70% probability, maybe higher depending on the environment. The physical advantages are too overwhelming. 6 feet of Valyrian steel reach versus 3.5 feet. Youth versus age. Strength that can swing a greatsword one-handed versus speed that age is already diminishing. One hit kills versus multiple hits needed. All the experience in the world cannot fully overcome those fundamental advantages. But that answer only tells part of the story. Daemon Targaryen killed more people, fought in more wars, proved his deadliness in blood across 3 decades and 2 continents. His body count is real. His victories are documented. His legend is built on actual corpses. When we call Daemon deadly, we are describing observed reality. He was deadly, probably, repeatedly, until the day he died doing the most impossible thing anyone had ever seen. Cregan Stark never had to prove it the same way. His deadliness was potential more than practice, reputation more than body count. He won through presence and intimidation, through being so obviously dangerous that people chose not to test him. That is a different kind of deadly. The kind that prevents fights instead of winning them. Is that more deadly or less deadly than actually fighting? Here is my personal take. In single combat, Cregan wins. But in terms of who was more dangerous to the realm, who caused more damage, who killed more people, that is, Daemon. Different definitions of deadly. Both valid, both true. Daemon represents the warrior who lives for combat, who defines himself through violence, who would rather die fighting than live peacefully. That path creates legends, also creates corpses. Daemon got both. His legend is permanent. His life was short. That is the trade. Cregan represents the warrior who fights when necessary, who values life and peace but will destroy you if you force his hand, who builds instead of burns. That path creates stability. Also creates questions about what you could have been if you had unleashed everything. Cregan lived long. His legend is mixed with politics and pragmatism. That is his trade. Neither path is wrong. They are just different answers to how a warrior should live. Daemon chose glory. Cregan chose duty. Both men got exactly what they chose. Both men earned their place in history. Both men deserve respect. The beauty of this comparison is that reasonable people can disagree. You might think Daemon's experience tips the scales, that his 35 years of killing makes him deadlier regardless of physical advantages. That is legitimate. You might think Cregan's undefeated record and overwhelming physical gifts make him the clear winner. Also legitimate. The debate works because both sides have strong arguments. So here is what I want you to do. Down in the comments, tell me who you think wins and why. Team Cregan or Team Daemon? Give me your reasoning. Tell me what factors you weight most heavily. Is experience more important than youth? Is proven violence more impressive than controlled restraint? Does the dragon make Daemon less impressive as a pure warrior, or is it just another tool? If you enjoyed this deep dive into Game of Thrones history and warrior comparisons, hit that like button. It helps the channel grow and tells me you want more content like this. Subscribe if you have not already, because we have many more legendary matchups coming. Arthur Dayne versus Barristan Selmy. Jaime Lannister in his prime versus the Hound. Robert Baratheon versus Oberyn Martell. The Mountain versus Gregor Clegane. Wait, that is the same person. You get the idea. Share this with your Game of Thrones friends who love debating these questions. Let them argue with you about the answer. That is half the fun. These legends live because we keep talking about them. Here is the final thought I want to leave you with. The greatest warriors are not always the ones who fight the most. Sometimes they are the ones who make others decide not to fight at all. Daemon Targaryen proved his deadliness by killing everyone who challenged him. Cregan Stark proved his deadliness by making sure nobody dared challenge him in the first place. Both methods work, both create legends, both deserve respect. Daemon got the warrior's death, locked in combat with his greatest enemy, falling from the sky in the most epic moment the Dance of the Dragons ever produced. Cregan got the Lord's death, old and respected, surrounded by family, having built something that lasted. You tell me which life you would rather live, which death you would rather die, which legend you would rather leave behind. The Wolf of Winterfell and the Rogue Prince, ice and fire, patience and aggression, north and south. Two men who defined what it meant to be deadly in the world of Westeros. Two legends who never met but will be compared forever. We may never know who would have won that fight, but we know both men won at something more important. They won immortality. Their names will be spoken as long as people tell stories about Westeros. Their deeds will be debated as long as fans argue about who was the greatest warrior. That is victory. That is legacy. That is what it means to be truly deadly. Not just ending lives, but beginning legends that never die. Cregan Stark, Daemon Targaryen. Two different paths to the same destination. Eternal glory. Both men earned it. Both men deserve it. And both men, in their own way, were the deadliest warriors of their generation. Now you decide who would win. Comment below. Let the debate continue. Because these legends are not finished. As long as we keep talking about them, they keep living. And warriors like this deserve to live forever.